before we go on.
Analysts need to be African Americans, not people that are not. Because let me tell you, no, it happens all the time. It's true. I mean, I think non-African Americans think African Americans all look the same.
Did she just say what I think she said? Well, that was Congresswoman Tlaib insisting that Detroit police only hire African Americans for doing what's called facial recognition analysis because white people are so racist they can't tell anyone apart. Well, that didn't sit well with Detroit's police chief, who said this.
We were appalled when she made the statement. There's a double standard. If I had made the exact same comment, they would have been calling for my resignation, and she would have been leading that charge. That's a fact.
Joining me now is Candace Owens, the founder of the Blexit movement and author of Blackout, and Monique Presley, Democrat strategist and attorney. All right, Monique, defend what Tlaib said there.
Well, there are stats that defend the basis for her information. So there's information that shows where facial recognition technology is concerned, that people who are of the same racial demographic as those that they are being able to identify or are supposed to be hired to identify have an easier time distinguishing between person and person. So that means that what she's saying, and what she said actually later was, no, I'm not saying that no white people should be involved in doing this job in this crime lab. I'm concerned that this is a city where there's 80% people who are African American, and in here there's 95% people who are Caucasian doing the recognition. So it's just a matter of data.
So it's the proportionality.
No, it's the issue of the data. If the data says that one person can do something with more accuracy than another, then especially where identification is concerned for crime, when you're using street cameras. If it was said the other way around,
don't talk over me. If it was said the other way around, Candace, a white person saying something even remotely akin to this, even if there were stats about certain type of behavior, or good behavior or bad behavior, you would be decried as racially stereotyping and using race as a basis for decision making, which is, I thought, what we were trying to get away from as a country. That's, to me, the double standard that is appalling here.
I mean, there's no question that what she said was racist. I'm going to take an optimistic take on this by saying that to hear that police officer speak out and call it racist is largely due to the fact that there is an awakening happening in the black community, and we are realizing that the real racists are Democrats. So I think that's a positive spin on that. I mean, you're absolutely right. If any person said something based on statistics, if somebody said we should only police in black neighborhoods because they commit the majority of the crimes, which by statistics would be accurate. Black Americans account for 13% of the population but commit over 50% of all the homicides in this nation. That fact would be called racist. If we say we should only have black police officers because we don't want white police officers getting killed when they're committing more of the homicides, that fact would be considered racist. Her comment was racist. Her comment was inexcusable. And I'm really happy that black Americans are speaking out and saying, I do not care if the shoe is on the other foot. Racism is racism.
Well, the black police officer himself said he'd be fired if he said something akin to that, which I thought that was wow. I mean,
but he didn't say that she was racist. What he said was, if I had said that, then I would be in trouble, meaning he can't speak the truth without getting in trouble. And this congresswoman could. So when we have stats, when we have data.
So are you saying we should determine racial composition by using, when it's the Monique show, you can interrupt.
It's coming.
Okay, good. So seriously, I'm asking a serious question. If stats alone determine racial classifications, I think would be going into not a great place for a lot of different people of all different backgrounds. Stats alone determining racial classifications. Wow.
No, it's not stats alone. But that's why I laid out the 1, 2, 3 of it. We have stats and data that say something. We have people in the crime lab that make up more of the proportion than they should.
Okay, we made that point. All right, let's get to this recent race hoax in Virginia. Now, this is not only tragic, it's an example of how the left's narrative is poisoning the minds of our kids. Now, what happened in this case is a 12-year-old black girl claimed that 3 white boys pinned her to the ground, cut her dreadlocks with scissors. The girl's family admitted it wasn't true. They issued a heartfelt apology. To be clear, I do not blame the children. This is a child. I do take issue with adults who tried to use this hoax to push their agenda right off the bat with no investigation like the NAACP tried to do. Now, first they tried to cover up the hoax, claiming the family reached a private resolution with the school. Next, the group said in a statement that, regrettably, the assault turned out to be false. Regrettably.
Talking about here, so just gonna scroll by. Y'all can read this here. Not sure how this is going to work. I don't know if there's anything.
As parents, no one wants to get that phone call to where
Analysts need to be African Americans, not people that are not. I think non-African Americans think African Americans all look the same. I've seen it even on the House floor, people calling Elijah Cummings John Lewis and John Lewis Elijah Cummings, and they're totally different people.
All right, Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib of Michigan telling Detroit police that only one race should be able to analyze facial recognition software.
The police chief firing back, saying he trusts anyone trained regardless of race.
And that Detroit Police Chief James Craig joins us live this morning. Sir, thank you so much for coming on the show. I want to start with, essentially, I didn't really understand what Representative Tlaib was saying here, because it's a computer that does this, right? It's a software.
It's software, it's biometrics, and to put race in it, we're talking about trained professionals. My staff goes through intense training with the FBI, and so they're not looking at race, but it's measurements. And I tried to explain that to her. The analyst tried to explain it to her. And so we were appalled when she made the statement.
She said this in a tweet, saying, tweeting at Detroit police, that you should, let's see, where is that tweet, if we can, you should probably rethink this whole facial recognition BS. She calls it BS. You heard in that soundbite there, she says, I think non-African Americans think that African Americans all look the same. I mean, I myself find that offensive, to think that she thinks that, people can't tell one another apart.
Horrible statement. And so, as I've said, and I'll continue to say it, there's a double standard. If I had made the exact same comment, they would have been calling for my resignation, and she would have been leading that charge. That's a fact. And so it's just no place. I've gotten so many calls from not just across the country, but, from my staff. I met with the analysts yesterday and just reinforced to them how much I appreciate the work. And I know that they're professionals, and we've done a great work with facial recognition. We know there's flaws in the technology. We've addressed that through the rigorous system that we have in place. So we have a model approach on how we use this technology very effectively.
Yeah, I mean, as we look at the B-roll here, and you start to see you can see like the measurement things taking place in the face. It doesn't really matter what color anybody is. If you've got this much distance between your nose and your eyes and your mouth and your nose and all these other things, you're going to pop up on this thing. Do you think that these are actual legitimate complaints that you're hearing from people like Rashida Tlaib, or is this just some kind of maybe pandering to a minority vote?
Well, I think some of the complaints when they talk about the misidentification, look, if we didn't have trained analysts behind the technology, I estimate it would probably misidentify 97, 98% of the time. We know that, and we've explained that. But what works is the work that goes on after the analyst goes in and methodically goes through a number of mugshots. We even put her in the seat of the analyst so she could understand how it works. And she's somewhat resistant, not really interested, but it was important for me to invite her in after she made her initial comments, so at least she could, learn something about how we use it and have maybe a greater appreciation for it. And the thing that's always missed when we talk about facial recognition is, what about the victims? And the only group of people that should be afraid of facial recognition, frankly, are the criminals. That's it.
All right.
Interesting. All right. Thank you, sir, so much for your time.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
But yet, she still has her job, but nobody's calling for her job or for her to be impeached out of office. I think they should.